When we dim the sitting room lamp and play a black and white classic, it is easy to assume every actor on the screen kept basking in that glow forever. Publicity departments of the great studios, MGM in Culver City, Warner Brothers in Burbank, Paramount on Melrose Avenue, worked hard to foster that illusion. Fan magazines during the 1930s and 40s promised readers that stars lived in Spanish Revival mansions, dined on caviar, and never worried about tomorrow. Yet Hollywood, like any other factory town, ran on harsh economics. Contracts could be canceled overnight, residuals were unheard of, and medical insurance was minimal. Many performers spent their weekly pay as quickly as it arrived, unaware that the spotlight would one day swing elsewhere. Some lost fortunes through lavish living, others through illness, lawsuits, or addiction. By the time newspaper obituaries appeared, the once luminous stars were often forgotten by the public. The public often learned with shock that a one-time idol had died nearly penniless. Tonight, we trace 10 such journeys. Each name once sparkled on a marquee. Each ending reminds us that fame, even in the so-called golden age, was a fragile currency. These stories are not meant to dim the magic of the movies, but to deepen our sympathy for the people behind the performances. Imagine the cheerful noise of a premiere fading into the hush of unpaid bills. Within that contrast lies the true drama that followed after every director yelled, "Cut." Peg Entwistle, born Millicent Lillian Entwistle in Port Talbot, Wales, was already a seasoned Broadway ingenue when Hollywood called. In 1927, she played Hedwig opposite a young Humphrey Bogart in a revival of Ibsen's The Wild Duck, drawing raves for a gaze that conveyed both fragility and backbone. Yet the Wall Street crash of 1929 emptied theater seats, and the novelty of talking pictures beckoned East Coast actors west like a lighthouse. RKO Radio Pictures offered her a standard stock contract and a train ticket to Los Angeles. She arrived to find the city in a heatwave and the studio in financial panic after expensive flops. Her single-screen role in the thriller 13 Women was first delayed, then drastically cut at preview screenings. The promised second picture never materialized. Meanwhile, room rents, clothing advances, and union dues accumulated. Because she had not yet earned the minimum weeks required for medical coverage, an untended ankle injury kept her from chorus work that might have paid the bills. On the evening of September 16, 1932, she left her uncle's Beechwood Drive bungalow, climbed the rugged maintenance ladder behind the new Hollywoodland sign, and jumped from the letter H. A handbag recovered later contained a pawn ticket, a creditor's notice, and a note reading, "I am afraid I am a coward." She was 24 and, according to coroner's records, carried less than $10 in cash. The studio quietly released 13 Women 2 months later. Her abbreviated performance proved haunting, but the paycheck could no longer help. Bela Lugosi was born Bela Ferenc Blasko in 1882 in the Hungarian town of Lugos. After World War I, he reached New York, learned English line by line, and electrified Broadway as Dracula in 1927. Universal filmed the role in 1931, his measured accent shaping every screen vampire since. Yet success became a cage. Producers typecast him in thrillers that offered modest pay and no future royalties. By the late 30s, even those jobs dwindled, so he worked for Poverty Row Studios on Gower Street. Sciatica led to prescribed morphine, and dependency followed, damaging dependability as well as finances. He filed for bankruptcy in 1954, listing a 1948 Packard, household furniture, and mounting medical bills. Fans organized small lectures that kept groceries on the table. At his death in 1956, news reports placed his estate under $1,000. He was buried wearing the famous cape, symbol of fame that enriched others far more than its owner. During World War II, he toured with Hollywood canteen shows, donating proceeds to bond drives, even though he himself was struggling. Back in Los Angeles, he took humble roles in serials like The Return of the Vampire, doing his own makeup when budgets ran dry. A last surge of hope arrived in 1955 when friend Ed Wood cast him in Bride of the Monster. Shooting took place at night to accommodate his clinic appointments, and Wood paid wages out of his own pocket. The public never saw those sacrifices, but they underscore how pride and professionalism persisted long after the headlines moved on. Lou Costello, born Louis Francis Cristillo in Paterson, New Jersey, learned comedy on the Depression-era burlesque wheel. In 1936, he paired with straight man Bud Abbott, polishing the rapid-fire routine now known as Who's on First. Universal's 1941 service comedy Buck Privates turned the team into wartime favorites and delivered Costello an income that once touched $1 million a year. He bought a ranch, racehorses, and a yacht, and he lavished gifts on family members as easily as he threw cream pies. Heartbreak struck on the 4th of November, 1943, when his infant son drowned in the backyard pool. Friends say grief loosened every financial restraint. He invested in boxing promotions, loaned cash without contracts, and fought the Internal Revenue Service over unpaid assessments. Partnership disputes with Abbott added legal fees. Recurrent rheumatic fever curtailed touring income. By the time Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein premiered in 1948, most profits served creditors. Nightclub bookings followed at a fraction of burlier salaries. When he died of a heart attack in 1959, the probate inventory, once expected to show millions, listed roughly $500,000. Comfortable by ordinary standards, it represented a small residue of what had flowed through his hands. Reminding later performers that comic timing is no substitute for an accountant. Gail Russell arrived on the Paramount lot at 19, her dark hair framing eyes so luminous that cinematographers whispered she generated her own key light. Born in Chicago in 1924 and raised in Los Angeles, she had planned to become a painter until a talent scout spotted her in a high school drama club. Her first major role was opposite Ray Milland in the 1944 ghost story The Uninvited, where her shy line deliveries matched the film's eerie restraint. Studio publicists fabricated a backstory of confidence, yet the young actress was painfully introverted. Interviews left her trembling, and she began swallowing shots of bourbon so she could reach the set without shaking. By the mid-40s, the flask was never far from her hand. John Wayne admired her screen presence and secured her casting in Angel and the Badman. But even that champion could not protect her once insurance underwriters refused coverage. Paramount suspended her contract after repeated tardiness, and newspapers published photographs of a car accident in which she, disoriented, had driven through a storefront window. Court fines, medical bills, and compensation claims consumed savings that might have offered recovery time. She retreated to small television parts, performing under hot Klieg lights that exacerbated chronic migraines. Neighbors later recalled the metallic chime of unpaid telephone bills slid under her apartment door. On August 26, 1961, police responding to a welfare call found her collapsed amid canvases she had been painting for a hoped-for gallery show. The coroner cited liver failure brought on by acute alcoholism, and the estate ledger showed assets of less than $2,000. Her story illustrates the silent terror stage fright can inflict when fame offers no shelter and medicinal swallows open a darker path. Linda Darnell, born Moneta Eloise Darnell in Dallas in 1923, seemed predestined for stardom. 20th Century Fox signed her at 16, coaching a faint Texas drawl into refined mid-Atlantic vowels and marketing her as the girl with the perfect face. In 1947, she endured a corseted workout for the historical romance Forever Amber, whose Technicolor decadence made the year's box office top 3. Yet the studio system ran on novelty, and once newer ingenues arrived, she found herself negotiating supporting roles that paid a third of her earlier salary. Her marriage to cameraman Peveril Marley dissolved amid rumors of infidelity, and she sought comfort in bourbon highballs sipped from a thermos between scenes. By 1952, Fox declined to renew her contract. Television and stage tours beckoned, but neither offered Hollywood-scale pay. She took bookings at Las Vegas lounges, summer stock in Pennsylvania, and civic opera benefits in Peoria, all while supporting her mother and siblings. Creditors circled, and life insurance policies were borrowed against to settle tax liens. In April 1965, she visited a former secretary, Jeanette LeBlanc, in suburban Chicago. While relaxing in the living room after a late screening of Stardust on television, a cigarette ignited the sofa upholstery. Flames swept the small house in minutes. Darnell pushed LeBlanc's daughters out a window, then was overcome by smoke before she could follow. She suffered fatal burns over 80% of her body and died the next day at Cook County Hospital. Aged 41, press reports revealed she carried no health insurance and minimal cash reserves. The Screen Actors Guild Relief Fund covered funeral expenses, and friends organized a retrospective screening to raise money for her mother. Thus, one of the 40s great beauties exited the stage, impoverished yet still brave enough to rescue others first. Edie Sedgwick entered the world of privilege on a California cattle ranch in 1943, but carried emotional scars that wealth could not salve. A debutante at Newport and a sculpture student at Harvard's Radcliffe Annex, she fled east in 1964, seeking artistic freedom. Within months, she had become Andy Warhol's most radiant superstar. Her silver blonde bob glinting under factory floodlights, while experimental films like Vinyl projected her restless energy. Warhol paid performers in social currency and cab fares, so she financed couture dresses and hotel suites by drawing against a substantial trust fund. The New York nightlife of Max's Kansas City provided amphetamines by the handful. Mornings dissolved into afternoons, and the trust faltered under the cost of limousines, gifts for hangers-on, and increasingly potent narcotics. A brief alliance with Bob Dylan's entourage promised redemption, yet bitter rumors later suggested she was simply another muse left unreimbursed. Doctors at Bellevue Hospital diagnosed acute drug dependency and severe depression, but fashionable friends considered clinics dull and smuggled her out to resume downtown parties. By 1968, the remaining trust income had been assigned to creditors, and Edie was back in California, living with her parents. She attempted a comeback, marrying fellow patient Michael Post and accepting a one-night nightclub booking that paid cab fare and little else. On November 16, 1971, after an evening appearance at a Santa Barbara fashion show, She died of combined barbiturate intoxication and alcohol at age 28. Probate filings listed personal property valued at just $680. Her rise and fall spanned 7 years, an entire life compressed into the quick change montage of 60s pop culture, proving that speed can shatter even the strongest fortune. Edward Davis Wood Jr., remembered today for Plan 9 from Outer Space, first declared his intention to direct while marching with the United States Marines across Tarawa in 1943. War over, he reached Los Angeles, clutching a battered typewriter and a pink Angora sweater he liked to wear for luck. Hollywood's gates were not welcoming. He scraped together car wash tips to shoot Glenn or Glenda, a confessional feature about gender identity that left exhibitors puzzled and investors fleeing. Undeterred, he convinced a Baptist congregation to bankroll his dream science fiction epic on the condition that the cast undergo on-screen baptism. The resulting Plan 9 premiered in 1959 to laughter that was not entirely kind. Box office receipts barely covered lab costs, and Wood began spinning hack Western scripts for $75 each, selling blood donation vouchers between drafts. He and his wife, Kathy, were evicted repeatedly, migrating from cheap motels along Yucca Street to friends' sofas lined with thrift store curtains. By the early 70s, he was directing softcore adult loops under a pseudonym to finance whiskey and typewriter ribbons. Despite decades of work, he qualified for none of the pension thresholds established by the Directors Guild. On December 10, 1978, after surrendering a final manuscript to a paperback publisher for $50, he suffered a heart attack in a cramped North Hollywood apartment. Neighbors held a collection to cover cremation fees. Legends claim the widow carried his ashes home on a municipal bus. Posthumous cult acclaim would eventually deem him beloved for his optimism, but the affection arrived too late to buy groceries. His cautionary tale underscores that creative zeal, however noble, must still negotiate with rent collectors. Farrah Fawcett lit up television screens in 1976 as Jill Monroe on Charlie's Angels, her feathered hair and wide Texan smile defining an era. Earlier modeling sessions had led to small parts on The $6 Million Man and Logan's Run. But Aaron Spelling's detective series thrust her into global pop culture. Her red swimsuit poster sold an estimated 12 million copies, and endorsement deals poured in. She bought acreage in Malibu and collected contemporary art, sensibly balancing glitz with investment. Marriage to actor Lee Majors collapsed in 1982, draining funds through legal fees and property division. Later companionship with Ryan O'Neal, though sincere, kept paparazzi cameras trained on her private life and dissuaded casting agents seeking calm publicity. Income fell as roles narrowed. Then, in 2006, doctors diagnosed anal cancer. Determined to fight, she chartered medically equipped flights to clinics in Germany, costs that insurance refused to cover. To pay invoices, she sold prized artworks below market. Her documentary, Farrah's Story, recorded the ordeal with candor, exposing viewers to the wallet-draining reality of serious illness. When she died on 25 June 2009, the estate retained some residuals and a Beverly Hills townhouse. Yet much of the earlier fortune had vanished into treatment bills. Courage stayed constant, but courage, like fame, cannot erase a ledger. The lights rise, the orchestra fades, and we step back from the velvet curtain. 10 names, 10 different fates, yet one message shines through. Glamour never guaranteed security. In Hollywood's classic decades, there were no reliable royalties, few pensions, and even less advice on sound investing. What has endured are the performances themselves, scenes that still comfort us on quiet evenings. When you revisit one of their films, perhaps pause to honor the person who stood beneath the lamps, hoping that applause would last. It did not always, but our remembrance can offer a measure of justice.